It is such a pleasure to be here, and it's really nice to look out and see a lot of faces that I know, particularly faces that I know from SWAT. So I know we've got some new members who are here this evening. If you aren't familiar with SWAT, the Southwest Association of Turners, every fourth weekend in August down in lovely, cool Waco, we have a wood turning symposium. Now, I cannot help but just sort of say this. I was at AAW in June, and they had just about 1,100 people attending. So how many did we have at SWAT last August? No, we were over 1,100. So SWAT is the largest of all of the regional turning symposiums, and there are so many wonderful things to see and do that I encourage you. There is not a less expensive symposium that you can attend anywhere in this nation than SWAT is. And as I say, Waco is beautiful this time of year. We're going to be talking about finials. Now, all of us want to turn Christmas ornaments in August. That's what your heart is set on doing. And really and truly, the earlier you get started, because if you wait until November or December, then you've run out of time and you may as well never mind. And then you'll say, oh, I'll do it next summer. And then there you are. Finials. Why finials, and why in particular? I'm staying with Joel, and I appreciate that. I looked at the beautiful work he did. I looked at the pyrography that Charlie has done, and some of the other turnings here, and I said to Joel, why am I here? You've got some fantastically talented turners, obviously, right here in this club. But do you know what they say about experts? An expert is someone who lives out of town. So that's all there is to it. And so I'm here from out of town, but I'm not going to say I'm an expert in anything. Heaven help us that I should say that. But finials. I belong to two wood turning clubs, the Waco Club and the Houston Club, because we lived in the Houston area for 35 years. And when my husband and I retired, we said we're leaving Harris County, and it was the best move we made. So I early on invited Cindy Drozda to come to the Houston Club to show us how to turn finials and to make ornaments in those beautiful boxes that she makes. And the year I was president of SWAT, guess who was the first demonstrator that I selected to come to SWAT? Cindy Drozda again. She has really impressed my life as far as my thinking about finials. I had written an article. I don't know if you take More Wood Turning, the online magazine, but I'd written an article for that. And basically, I started my article out by saying I see turners who do some beautiful work on globes. And they'll select beautifully figured wood. And that should be the center, or the central thing that I'm going to be looking at. And then they attach a finial, and the whole globe and all of its beauty just goes down the drain because the finial is too long, too short, too busy, the wrong color. So we're going to talk a lot tonight, and I know you want to see shavings, and so we'll try to make a few. But I really want to impress upon you that when you're making an heirloom ornament that you're going to be giving to family members or friends, spend a little bit of time thinking about it. Don't wait until you got it on the lathe and say, oh, what does it turn into? Try to give yourself a little bit of, go through a little bit of thought process. Now, I've stuck two little ornaments, little globes up here on the cabinetry. You've got a couple of choices. I didn't put an oval one up. I guess we could just turn this one around and it would be oval. You can either make a round ornament, or you can make a squatty ornament, or you can make an oval ornament, or you can get real wonky with it. Let me pull these two off. And let's just sort of look at the ornament itself. This one is round, and this one is a little squatty. And so you kind of will decide for yourself which you prefer. I don't have problems with the round ones. I tend to like the somewhat squatty ones a little better for myself. So I made one to an extreme. I made a really squatty one. Well, it's not awful, but I don't know. Would you pick this design if you were going to make an ornament? Probably not. Probably not. It just looks a little too disproportionate. So we probably are going to decide between a round one or an oval one. Now, I did not make one that's oblong. Yeah, I do. I've got an oblong one here. I'd forgotten about this one. This one is slightly oval. And to tell you the truth, I don't like that one at all. Personally, I want it either round or I want it wider than it is tall. This one, I don't know why it turned out that way. It just did. But that's the only one I've ever turned like that, and I didn't like it, so put that one aside then. All right. Something that I learned, how many of you have seen a demo by Cindy Drozda? Oh, golly, well, why am I here? Okay. Okay, how many of you have not seen a demo by Cindy Drozda? Thank you. All right. Cindy introduced us to something that I was not familiar with called the golden mean. And the golden mean is a ratio of proportion that was actually developed for architecture by the ancient Greeks. And the ratio is 1 to 1.618. And what all does that mean? Now, just think in terms, first of all, 1 to 1.6. 618 is really close to 666. So you may hear it referred to as the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds. So basically, it is a natural occurring proportion. If you look at the human body, my head, for example, is 1/3 the width of my torso. My head this way is 1/3 the length of my torso. So even within the human body itself, my torso is 1/3 compared to the 2/3 of the length of my legs. So even within the human body itself, that golden mean, that ratio, is a naturally occurring aesthetic ratio. And because it's naturally occurring, we find it pleasing to the eye. Now that a circle, a plumb circle, does not follow the golden mean, but it doesn't mean that's not aesthetically pleasing. So you can turn any kind of a turning, a bowl, a lidded box, an ornament, and you don't have to follow the golden mean, but it may or may not look just right. But if you follow the golden mean, it will always be aesthetically correct. So for you new turners, I'm not saying there's only one way to do it. I'm saying if you start with some guidelines, you will find that your turning looks nice right away. It took me several years to figure out what I was doing wrong. And then Cindy came to the club and the veil was lifted. Well, all right. Now, so the length of the finial and what the finial looks like. Is that good? Is that bad? It's certainly longer than 2/3, isn't it? So it's probably a little bit extreme. That one, too short. I mean, and it just doesn't look right. Too short. Now, the shape is not too bad. Okay, what about this one? Woo! Yeah. And what are you looking at the globe? No. You're looking at this because there's so much going on. And I have to tell you, when I first started turning finials, I had learned to do beads and coves and captive rings and knots and all those sorts of, and I put them all on one finial. Everything I'd learned to do, I did on one finial. And goodness gracious, it was like a circus going on there. What about this one? That one's too long. And if I'm looking at that finial, where does my eye go? Goes to the middle of it. Is that where my eye needs to go? Probably not. Let's go back to one that might make a little bit of sense. All right. Now, can you begin to see 1/3, 2/3 on this one? Now look at the finial itself. 1/3, 2/3. So I've actually divided the finial itself into thirds, that golden mean. Now the whole idea of the finial is to complement the globe, not to take away from it. I want my eye, now see, this is very small. This one, for example, even if it were simple like this, if I put something really huge at the bottom of it, my eye is not going to flow up toward the globe. So you want to have a way of making your eye flow into the globe. Now, I had some little top knots here, too. Why did I take... Here we go. Another thing, your little top finial actually needs to look like it's somewhat related to the bottom finial. So if you're using curves on the bottom finial, you'll want to use curves on the top. Does that kind of make sense? And this is another thing I've seen. I've seen people bring an ornament. Well, the body of it is spalted silverleaf maple and the globe. And then one finial is ebony and the other finial is cocobolo. Okay. It's sort of like eating at a Chinese restaurant where you just get it all and put it all together. No, the top one and the bottom one, you really would like for them to be out of the same wood. Now remember, these are not hard, fast rules. These are guidelines that I'm throwing out to say that if you follow those guidelines, you won't go wrong. Your finial in color, and color is important too. A light color draws the attention of the eye. A dark color will recede. So now I was a drama teacher for many years. If I wanted a character to stand out on stage, I put that character in either white or yellow, and then they stand out on stage. If you don't want that character, if you tell me where you want me to hold these, okay. If you don't want someone to stand out, put them in a dark color, and that dark color will recede into the background. So on this particular ornament, I did the little simple pyrography on it. So the walnut finial was a fairly decent choice because it complemented another color that I was already using. And this is what we're looking at. So, this is just complementing. It's not arguing with it. So why in the world would I have chosen a light-colored finial for this little ornament? That's why. Because there was a feature within the globe that this finial matched. And so I felt like I could get away with a light-colored finial on it because it actually brought out something that was already in the globe. Okay? Now, I happen to just love spalted wood. And my very favorite finials in the whole wide world are either blackwood or ebony. You cannot go wrong by putting a blackwood or an ebony finial on anything. And if you don't have blackwood or ebony, use black shoe dye. I have been known to just dye my finials, make them out of a cheaper wood and polish them up like your shoes. So anytime you've got that spalting, a black finial set is going to look nice, I think. Yes, sir?
You talked about the length of the finial in relation to the globe. How about the top?
I usually like to go with about 1/3. I like for my top one to be about 1/3 the globe size, and the bottom one to be about 2/3 the globe size. Yes, sir. Okay. This one was an experiment, and the whole thing is out of holly, and I just wanted to see what would happen if the whole thing was white. And I did a little bit of pyrography on it that's very, very, very pale. And I can't say that I like this one or don't like this one, but okay. I think it's okay to have the white finial on it.
It would be very striking on a Christmas tree.
Yes, it sure would stand out on a tree, this light color. Yeah. So that's kind of a neat thing. This one is holly also, but it's so covered by pyrography that that I want people to look at that. I don't want people to look at that finial. So I'm going to put a dark finial. If I'm going to go to that much work up here on this globe, I don't want you looking at the finial. And notice this is really simple, very simple. And it's narrow this way. Usually I like to have a thicker, just a little bit thicker at the base here. But because I had so much going on here, I thinned it down a little bit because I want this to be the eye catcher for this particular ornament. So color. When you're selecting your finials, see this mahogany looked pretty nice with this elm because these colors, they're the same color. I mean, it brings out the color. And so that one seems to work pretty well, I think. I'm just going to show you this one. Now this is Coco Bolo and something. I have no idea what this is. It's wood that I got from somebody. But I don't suspect you probably have seen a segmented ornament that was segmented so randomly. An open segmented. Actually, this is going to be an article in the December AAW journal on how to do this, and it's so embarrassingly simple. And I'll go ahead and tell you this. It's one piece of wood that I cut on the bandsaw, and I took that middle piece and went back to the bandsaw and randomly just cut out pies, wedges, glued it all back together, and when you turn it, where those wedges were, open up little windows. And so it's humiliatingly and embarrassingly simple, but it looks like it's real complicated, and it's not. Jerry Bennett, you may know him as a segmented turner, is the one who developed that process and taught it to us or showed it to us at the Houston Club about 10 years ago, and I applied it to ornaments.
Janice, what about the number of elements in a finial?
You can see that I don't have much going on.
I think Cindy was trying to remember whether it's 2 or 3 at the moment. I think it was 2.
Right. Well, the bottom, and then this, and then the top. So if you sit,
If you have a cove and beads, you shouldn't have any square cuts or
right,
leaves
and no symmetry, and she says throw symmetry out the window. And the reason being, if you look at something that's not exact, that's asymmetrical, your eye says that's okay. But if you look at something that's supposed to be symmetrical and it's not quite, your eye goes, oh, that's not quite right. That's not quite right. We can take asymmetrical, but not messed up symmetry. All right. We'll actually try to do a few little turnings here then to try to show. This is poplar, which is just cheap wood. This dyes real well. What kind of woods should you use? One of these is mahogany, blackwood, walnut. Now walnut is somewhat of an open grain wood, and you have to be a little careful with walnuts and mesquites. I don't use oak or ash at all, but sometimes you've got a walnut that's not terribly open grain and it'll work okay. Hardwoods seem to work really well for finials. I like softer woods for the globes and harder woods for the finials, basically, are my preference. And maple is another really nice wood. Of course, it's a lighter color wood, so you have to make sure if you're going to pick maple that you've that you have a reason for picking maple. Now, this little, I brought just a little globe, and this, I believe, is silverleaf maple. No, yeah, I think this is silverleaf maple that's maybe got a little spot. I won't swear to it. Somebody gave me a piece, and there it is. But it's about 2 inches. So 2 inches, see. And so that means that my finial on the bottom should be 4 inches. Should be 4 inches. Now, can I fudge a little bit and go 4.5? Yes. Yes. Should I go 5? No. That's probably fudging a little too much. So we'll mark off just about 4 inches, and that's going to be our bottom finial. This is an end grain turning or spindle turning. So those of you new turners, you may use a tool like a roughing gouge or a spindle detail gouge to do your work. You may use a skew if you have some experience with using a skew. You actually can use your bowl gouge to do spindle work. If your tool is sharp, you can use it. But we put that name spindle on some of ours, and we think that's the only thing we can use them on. Or bowl on some of them, and we think, oh, that's the only thing I can use that for. All right. I'm going to use a detail gouge, and the detail gouge that I use, and I'm not trying to sell any of Doug Thompson's tools, but he's always at SWAT, and he puts out a good product, and you can...
Put the end right over the top of your workpiece, and it'll be great.
Okay. You always know that you've got a good piece of iron or metal, or steel actually, and you can make your own handles that suit yourself. And that's what I like to do. When I first started turning, the handles didn't fit my hand properly, and I complained, and I've always had kind of longer fingernails, and when I would hold them, my fingernails would cut into my hand on those tools that I was buying, and so I decided I needed thicker tools to make it more comfortable in my hand. So I like making my own handles, and it's actually a little cheaper if you do that too. All right, let me turn this. Okay, we are turned down. It was on. Wow, it was already turned on, and I was almost going to pull the knob off. All right, so now we know that this is where our finial is going to end, and I know that if I'm dividing this into thirds, there we go with about where the top 1/3 is going to be, and I'm going to try to make this lower 2/3 narrow. One of the things that you want to make sure of is when you're turning that you try to avoid any straight lines. The eye enjoys a curved line more than a straight line. I'm not going to turn the whole thing round. I want to save as much bulk in the upper part of the finial as I can. And I'm going to work on between a 1/2 inch and 1 inch at a time. Now, as I'm shaping this down, I want to talk a little bit about your health and your back. If you've been turning for several years and you find that your back hurts, then one of the first things that you might want to look at is that old rule they used to tell us when you first started turning, and that is that your elbow should be the height of the spindle, and that's rubbish. Because when that is down here, what am I doing? And what does this do to your back? Makes it hurt after years. So if your spindle, or if you're up higher, you don't have to bend over. And so you're able to save your back a little bit. Now, there we go. A lot of turners are afraid to turn thin. They'll say, oh, it's going to break. So one of the things that we're going to do in our class tomorrow is turn thin. And I like to just start out as thin as I want it, or as thin as I think it needs to be. And if I start out with it around 1/8 of an inch or a tiny bit over or a tiny bit under, then it's not going to be too big at the bottom. So start out by shaping that last 1/2 inch or so thin. Now, it's okay to do a little ball or a little teardrop on the end. The simplest thing for you to do, and I'm just using the little, I'm using the very tip and rubbing that rubbing that bevel, the bevel's edge, I think is what I was, hey, why not? Rubbing the bevel's edge. Now I'm going to make a little feature here because, okay, so now I've got that point, and I'm just using a detail gouge. I could use a skew, and the skew that I do use, I brought it with me. This is the skew I use. And somebody said, why do you use such a tiny skew? And I said, if I use a big skew and make a mistake, it goes bloop. If I use a little skew and it makes a mistake, it goes bloop. That's why I use a little skew. Now, I'm going to slope this cut down from my first feature, which is my little point at the end. Let me come back here and thin down a little more. Now, I want the thinnest part to be maybe about 1 inch up from the little pointy at the end here. And why about 1 inch up? Because it looks, if I put it too close here, then it has to get too thick too soon. So I can, well, just aesthetically again, it seems to look a little better to do it that way. Now, you've always been taught you cannot go uphill. But my tool is sharp, and that's not terribly uphill. So you can go uphill if you have a sharp tool and you're not, I mean, I wouldn't go uphill here. But here, that's not enough of an angle to create a problem. So I can go uphill to reach that little thin point, that little thin part that I'm looking for. It's going to be about 1 inch from the bottom there. That's too thick. It's got to be thinner than that. Now, I could cut this, but if you'll notice, I'm scraping this now. I'm actually just scraping with the tip end of this, tool. And now a scrape doesn't give me as nice a cut as a cut does, but a scrape is safer than a cut at this point. And you'll see some people will put their finger behind it, and you certainly may do that. But generally speaking, if you make your cut light enough, you're not going to have any trouble at all turning very thin. You know, I've got my shield that I brought over here. Is there anybody representing AAW here? Okay. This year, AAW said, if you do not wear your shield, you'll be escorted from the room, basically, no matter what you're doing. And so there were a whole lot of turners who were not accustomed to wearing shields. And I do when I'm doing work at home. Now I get so, it's sort of almost, what is it, soothing to the soul to do this. Is that why some of you turn wood? Because you can get out in your shop in your own little world and do things that are just soothing to the soul. And you have to just think about that. You can't think about other things. Now, back to making sure that you take care of yourself health-wise. Most of us are right-hand turners, but if you're just roughing a piece of wood, a repetitive motion causes injury to the body over a period of time. If you can change hands, especially when you're just roughing, and get out of that repetitive motion, you will be friendlier to your body. Your body will thank you for it. I had been having some back issues, and finally my doctor sent me to a physical therapist, and he was very concerned about what I was doing and how I was standing at the lathe and how I turned things. Even offered to come out to my house to see how I did things in my shop with each of the tools. And we have not yet done that, but we are probably going to do that. And he was able to actually identify specifically what muscles I was abusing, and then gave me some exercises for them. And I have to tell you, it has changed my life.